Hello. Welcome back to your STEP classes. These are 6 half-hour info sessions for young people and others that include development, behavior, adolescence, risks, distress, and the ACE study. It's science that explains people. This is session 3, multiply by 10, the special developmental challenges for teens. It could be named, It's Not Easy Being a Teen. It's presented by the Kansas Traffic Safety Resource Office. By the way, a few beginning slides are repeated every session. It's just a few. They'll be over soon. So welcome. These sessions were designed for teens, but everyone else is welcome. We think everyone should know how differently the teen brain works and develops. I'm your narrator, Karen Williams. My message to teens. Please forgive me. I'm going to speak about you and your brains as if you were not in the room. And it's often easier that way when others are also in the room. For instance, on some slides I will use they and theirs instead of you and yours, or often I will just refer to teens. The goal of this session is to help you understand what's unique about your brain. During adolescence, the teen brain is being remodeled and it works differently. It's truly under construction. In fact, the teen years are among the most important periods in all of brain development. The latest science shows that there are 75 major differences in the teen brain when compared with the adult brain. And 15 of these differences affect teens' ability to drive safely, which is why the Kansas Traffic Safety Resource Office is bringing you this series. In session 2, we learned about one of the most important differences in the teen brain, the added amount of and the added duration of cortisol. In this session, we will address the other top differences. The most important reason for you to know about your brain is that in terms of development, the teen years give you the capacity to build the kind of brain you will take into adulthood. No matter what has happened to you before, you now get the chance to have major input into your own development. Remember, your thinking parts start over. Is it easy? No. You are changing in dozens of ways, and the adults in your lives are not ready. Some of you will wake up one day and your adults are either patient or frustrated or angry or all three all of the time. And sometimes it feels as if you have a target on your back and the world is full of people doing target practice. If you've ever wondered why everything goes just a bit balinky during the teen years, science now has the answers. The teen brain is both brilliant and bored. But first, it's just a whole lot different. There are 2 periods of massive and very different developmental vulnerabilities. Everybody knows what vulnerability means, right? The first one is birth to 10 years. It's your childhood years. And it's about foundations and basics, walking, talking, getting all the stuff done you need, okay? And then adolescence, that's 10 through age 24, or it includes the teens, 10 to 20. But it's about preparation for adulthood and a second chance. If there are things that you missed out on during those first 10 years, you get a chance to make them up. It's really good. And mostly, it's about preparation for adulthood. Now, I want you to know that adolescence is different than puberty. Adults make this mistake all the time. They talk about puberty as if it's the only thing going on. But adolescence includes massive changes to the brain. That's ages 10 through 24. And puberty refers to the changes in the body's reproductive system, including changes in the body's appearance and functioning. Adolescence is truly an umbrella term, standing for both brain changes and body changes. And, by the way, the changes due to puberty do make teens more distressed and therefore more emotional, but puberty is not responsible for all the other brain changes. Teen years, double whammy. There's a massive brain reset. The PFC, the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain in charge of self-directed attention, thinking, making decisions, empathy, patience, whatever else, okay, is reset. It's really like pushing a button. So new experiences can rewire the brain for adulthood. Then comes puberty, okay, plus puberty. Its reproductive hormones create new emotional sensitivity to everything. And why not? You're growing hair in parts of your body that you've never grown hair. Your voice is changing. Can't raise your hand without your voice failing you. Girls are getting breasts and periods, and boys are experiencing tense under the sheets in the morning. It's like your body was possessed by somebody else. And then your brain's being changed. For 50% of youth, this brain reset period and puberty happen at the same time. And that's, I think, why parents just focus on the puberty, because you're physically changing so much. But they don't always know about the brain reset. But think about it. 50% of kids experience brain reset and puberty at the same time. Let's have a moment of silence for them and for their parents. Now, we all know that a child's brain is ill-suited, not suited, for life as an adult. The thinking part of the child's brain has to be kind of refitted for life on the adult racetrack. So during the teens, the child's old parts are removed. That's called pruning or pruned. So the new parts can be installed by new experiences. Look, much of the networking from birth to 10 years is really what's called scaffolding. You know, when you're building a building, you put a scaffold up and you work on the building. It gives it becomes your ladder, your workspace. Well, talking about the brains, scaffolding in the brain is temporary networks that are needed during early development and during childhood, but these are not meant to be permanent. They got to be removed at some point. Now, removing in the brain is called pruning because neurons look like little trees, and, automatically scientists thought of pruning when they saw stuff being removed from the brain. Well, during the teen years, ages 10 to 20, DNA removes, if you want to call it pruning, fine, the networks that were part of the scaffolding of childhood. It simply cuts them out. And then DNA removes and prunes the networks that did not get enough blood, oxygen, and energy to thrive. Look, you have to use them or lose them. And finally, after the basic pruning is over, DNA opens up new sections of neurons, which have been reserved from birth to be networked by new experiences in prep for adulthood. They're held in reserve till you get ready for them. Okay, look, you get your neuron. Looks like a little brain tree. So when it's networked and connected and wired, it's just growing all those networks, okay? And then DNA comes in and goes, let's remove what's seldom used, okay? It didn't get strong enough to stay, and the scaffolding, the temporary networks that were built during childhood. It makes the brain more efficient, and it makes, a lot more room. So let's talk about pruning. When the pruning begins in teen years, it's as if a mad scientist has taken hold of your brain and behavior. And then he leaves, taking part of your brain with him. And that is so true. The part that pruning targets is our prefrontal cortex, the PFC, person first class, problem first class. You get to choose. And you know where it's located. Now, the prefrontal cortex are executive functions. That's what your prefrontal cortex does. And its executive functions means you can use it for running a business, but it's really about running yourself because, the whole goal of adolescence is for you to become your own parent, practice being parent before you get to be a parent. So it's self-directed. You direct it. Attention, focus, concentration, thinking, problem solving, decision making, judgment, and control. You didn't have a lot of that in one time as a child. In childhood, the prefrontal cortex learns to follow instructions, do errands and chores efficiently, mind adults without question, not to bend the rules, and to behave. Well, remember, the PFC is ready to be rebuilt in the teens for new uses in adulthood, so these are pruned, chopped out. You've been robbed. Your parents think they've been robbed because there's nobody doing the chores or following instructions as well. That stuff's been tampered with. This all came from a 15-year brain scan study by the National Institutes of Health and the University of California at Los Angeles. Dr. Jay Geet and Dr. Paul Thompson released it in 2004, but remember, it started 15 years earlier. Now, in the study, scientists and doctors made brain scans with a magnetic resonance imaging scanner, which does not use any radiation. And this is the reason we didn't have any brain scans of early development early on before, because all the rest of the scanners had radiation in them. They used radiation. But this MRI scanner does not. So now we could actually look at the child's brain without harming them. So what they did is they scanned only the cortex, the wrinkled outer layer of the brain, and they did kids only from ages 5 to 20. So, your prefrontal cortex is part of that wrinkled layer that's right there. Okay, you can see it up there. And that's all they scanned. Now, there was no one, children under 5 years old were excluded because they could not stay still throughout the scan, which is 45 minutes. They're doing another study right now out in California as well, And they have there are 12,000 kids that's going to they're going to follow for 30 years. And they have computers that can compensate for the child's head movement. So they're doing infants, from infants all the way up. Okay. So cool deal. All right. Now they scan the top, both sides, and the bottom of the cortex. You want to get your orientation here. Look down on the top of your hand. That's like looking down on the top of the brain. And up where your fingers, the tips of your fingers are, that's your prefrontal cortex, from about your knuckles forward. That's your prefrontal cortex. Okay. So side of the cortex, get your orientation. Tuck your thumb and make a little fist and tuck your thumb inside either side. Either hand, you have a left and right hemisphere, so you've got one of each. And that's those fingers, take the fingers that are tucked under, are the cortex that's folded under. Notice part of the brain folds under. And the bottom of the cortex is the palm of the hand. Just flip the hand over and you're looking at the bottom of it. It's like it's the cortex. That's the underside. And it's the most protected part because, it's hidden away. Okay, got your orientation? Good. Now, this picture here is a group composite of the MRI scans of brain development for ages 5 to 20. And a group composite is they just have a single scan image. It's like they stacked all the scan images on each other and watched them all at the same time. And that's what you're looking at right now. Now, there is a side view and a top view that are matched, okay, for grades K through 2. It's matched there. Grades 3, 5, it's matched there. Grades 6, 8, your side, okay, got it. Grades 12, and that's college. All right, so what happened? Scientists and doctors met with twins so they could remove the genetic, or understand the genetic overlaps. They met with twins over a period of 15 years, scanning their brains multiple times each year as they developed. They used colors to identify the changes. Now, these colors are used by all scientists in all brain scan studies, but they assigned these colors different tasks. Red is the least developed. Now, look at the red. Okay, it gets to be less and less and less, but look at that word side view up here on the left-hand side. Now, there's no brain from birth to 5, but if there were brain scan of the side and top, it'd be mostly red because it's least developed. So remember that. Red's the least developed. Yellow and green are early development. Dark blue, halfway, and bright lavender, your basics are wired. Now, certain parts of the brain, your basics are wired. And by the way, that's where the teen driver is, grades 9 to 12. Okay, so from the top and side views, development progresses very much like we expected, okay? We expected you to do this. Now, the major finding of this study, it says it takes a minimum of 25 years to build a basic brain. The brain's not finished, okay? Just a basic brain. So the adolescent brain is about halfway to being basic when the thinking part starts over. Things get reset. From the top of the brain, it appears that everything's going along in the right direction for the PFC. Now, you have that whole front section as your PFC, but they've isolated a little piece of it and followed that same piece over the years. 5 years old, early, least developed. And then preteen, then teen. Oh, you've got middle development. And then by 20, it's pretty much half developed. So let's look how things are going. However, I want you to take note of the red. That's the least developed, still evident at age 20. Oh, where the place where your prefrontal cortex folds under? Okay, that's where that's pointing to. So let's look at the underside of the cortex of ages 5 to 20. 5's on the left-hand side, 20's on the right-hand side. Look how much red is still there. Now, remember, red is least developed. You have that when you're first born. And remember also, yellow and green are early development, dark blue is halfway, and bright lavender, the basics are wired. There's no bright lavender except a tiny little bit on that right side, right in the center of that right brain. Right picture. So what is that red? It's judgment. That's where judgment's located in the brain. And look, it's a whole lot better than at age 5. But at age 20? Oh, man. So just realize that when it comes to thinking and judgment at age 20, it's surely in early development or least developed. And that's important to know. We didn't know that before this study. Now, this is your PFC synaptic density at birth, age 6 and 14. Synaptic density is just network density, okay, where all the networks have been wired together. And I'm going to read the thing on the left before we look at the chart. One major example of pruning is during adolescence, when childhood concrete thinking is removed so abstract thinking can be built and developed. So it took out some so it can build. Now let's look at birth. You have 100 billion neurons, but very few of them, just for what you can do as an infant, have been wired. By 6 years old, man, you have wired. You walk, talk, take care of yourself, go to school, all sorts of stuff. Now look at the 14-year-old. It does not take a rocket science to figure out that something's missing. And I hate to tell you this, but it's true. At the height of pruning, when the pruning is the most, teens have less thinking ability than a 6-year-old. A 14-year-old has less thinking ability than a 6-year-old. Yeah. This is a prefrontal cortex. This is your PFC. This is what it's supposed to be doing. Now, you've been taught to follow instructions and so forth, but now that's been cleared out. So think about it. You have less thinking ability than a 6-year-old. That's why your parents say to you, "What were you thinking?" Well, it'd be good if you could, but you can, but they have to help you. Okay, anyway, the peak of adolescent PFC pruning. Now, at the bottom of this chart, there's 10, 11, 12, 13. It goes to your ages, okay, 10 through 19, up to 20 years old. And we're looking at a bell curve. And a bell curve means if I had my little bars here and I drew a pencil line across the top of them, they'd all shape like a bell. Because the ends are alike each other is kind of what a bell curve means. And so we're looking at the peak of development, a peak of adolescent pruning. So when they're being chopped out the most. Now we have 3% on either side, 5% on the other side, 7.5%, 10%, 15%. Okay, right in the middle is 25%. 25% of all adolescents everywhere have pruning at its peak at ages 14, 15. And in other words, at the peak of pruning, you have less thinking ability than a 6-year-old at 14 and 15. If you add the two 15s together, come up with 30 and add it to the 25, you get 55%. Adolescents between 13 and 16, ages of 13, 16, have less thinking ability than a 6-year-old. That's when the peak of pruning is. And the most pruning happens at different times. Some happen at 3, some happen at 19. For most part, girls are the ones who do the early peaking, and guys do the later. That's just generalized. Okay? So when this pruning and opening of new neural territory begins, teens, you, become more like tall toddlers. Yeah, under 6, there's 5, 4, 3, yeah. And the phase can last from 6 to 12 months. And you see that face? That's a toddler face and pretty much a teen face. Plus, your internal feedback system that you know what you're doing has been pruned. So when your parents tell you that you've been doing some stuff and you go, I don't know that. You don't know that because your internal feedback system needs to be rewired to be an adult. Yeah, it really is not good. So teens and toddlers display very similar behaviors because the same part of their brain, the PFC, is under duress or distress, whichever you want to call it. Now let's talk about toddlers. What's their favorite word? No. Yeah, well, they're described as being rebellious, willful, self-centered, have mood swings, and can't delay gratification. Rebellious, no, my, me, I do it. Totally self-centered, have mood swings, they can cry one moment and laugh the next, and they can't delay gratification. When was the last time you heard a 2-year-old go, "Oh, mommy, get me that toy after payday. I really don't need it right now." Yeah, in your dreams. Let's look at the 14 and 15-year-olds. Oh, they're cute. But guess what? They're described as being rebellious, willful, self-centered, have mood swings, and can't delay gratification. Ooh. You're just, yeah, a lot in common. And, let's talk those toddlers. Need for sleep. Can't get them to sleep. You have to put in a car and drive them around. Appetite. They don't want to eat food. They eat everything in sight. Eye rolling. 3-year-old girls can eye roll with the best of them. Impulsive and whiny. How do they describe you? Need for sleep. You can't get to sleep and you hate getting up because you haven't had any sleep. Appetite. You put a 25-pound lasagna in a room with 2 teenage boys and go away for 15 minutes. You come back, the 25-pound lasagna is gone, the little orange ring around the mouth, and they're standing with their arms on the refrigerator door going, "What's for dinner?" Eye rolling. It's not just eye rolling, it's everything. Everything's out of control. And you're impulsive and whiny. Not your fault, but you're that way. Impatient? Look, if you're 3 years old, only 3 years later, you're going to be 6, and you're going to have to be on your own all day with strangers in school. If you do it any younger, it's even more stressful. And impatient? Say you're 15, so there's only 3 years till you're 18, until you have to be on your own legally, and you are responsible for all your own actions. 18, yeah, that's what the law recognizes you as, that person responsible for yourself. So in 3 years, you got a lot to do. Look, toddlers are just starting out, learning to control their body and their behavior. And you are starting over, learning to control your urges and surges. And that's why you and your parents storm so much, all adults. And you know what? In order for the toddler who just got his prefrontal cortex switched on, in order for them to finish all they've got to finish before they turn 12 and get pruned, they need a racing brain. And you have a racing brain. Your brain is so much quicker than it's ever been ever before in your life. And young ones learn by exploration. Well, you learn by exploration. Your parents are just afraid you're going to explore each other. And then, look, we can accept a toddler being brainless, but guess what? You're brainless again, and that's a ripoff. And then come hormones. Oh, great. And then, because your parents really don't understand this, they leave you alone. And you push away from parents. That's part of adolescence, but you need to find an adult you trust to guide you through this period. It's not easy being a teen. Now, teens are on overdrive so they can complete all their new development on schedule. You only have a few years to get ready. And your brain learns new information at 50 to 80 times faster than adults do. It's amazing. This is so you can learn all the new stuff for adulthood. And adults are so much slower. And that's why you doubt adults so. I mean, they know things that you don't. And you can think like a 6-year-old, well, do you need them? But they're so much slower. And teens are driven by the need for new ideas and innovation. In fact, you create more innovation than any other group ever. And adults are just repositories of what already exists and the old ideas and ways. You rely on adults far less, on your teen peers more, but I want to remind you of something. Your teen peers have the same brain problems that you do. They're pruning, they're wired, they have more cortisol, and the fact that they can't think, they've got less thinking ability than a 6-year-old, might make you make a different decision about trust. Okay, so teen brains are pre-wired for technology. We all know this. I mean, a 2-year-old can use a cell phone. A 4-year-old can master it. It's the only thing that goes as fast as a teen brain and the only thing that some teens get to control. It's amazing. Teens can use all technology, new technology, immediately. This is while the adults are still reading or looking for the instructions. You've got it nailed. And that's another reason teens think they know it all. You know that. That's for sure. Now, this is the adult view versus the teen view on technology. I don't know when this happens, but this is a teenager reading a newspaper. I don't think it happens really often. And he's tapping on the page. And the mother says, you actually have to turn the pages of a newspaper. Oh, man, I wish all my media all operated on the same platform. Well, let's look at the teen view. Parents are in a cell phone store. And there's a note over here. It says, parents must have a note from their teenager before choosing a cell phone. You know why? They're going to turn to you to set it up, and they're going to ask you to fix it. Yeah, different looks. Okay. The rest of the teen brain changes too, my darling. It's just not the prefrontal cortex. So, at the same time the prefrontal cortex is changing, so is the rest of the brain. Now, let's review this. the amygdala and AMG and cortisol. In other words, our survival system, amygdala, cortisol, fight, flight, and freeze, are all working overtime to protect the teen brain. And teens have 2 to 5 times more cortisol than adults. That makes things good and bad. Now, dopamine, our biochemical that controls our reward center, becomes far more sensitive to discomfort and pain. You don't get your needs met, you're tired, you're hungry, you're afraid, you're alone, something's happened to you. You feel that differently. Teens feel more pain than adults in the same situation, and that added cortisol increases their impatience for relief. That's why you try stuff. You're bored, you try anything. You hungry, any discomfort causes you to get very impatient with something that will ease that discomfort. And DNA adds 3 new drives to the teen's reward center. You want power, and this is the period of time you're supposed to learn about power, how to use it. Purpose, your purpose in life is most determined by age 24. And partnership, who you're going to spend the rest of your life with. Don't make that decision quickly because lifetime is a long time. But that's all going on in the brain. And you know what the piece de resistance is? Guess what? Your circadian rhythms, your sleep cycles revert to childhood. So at a time when your body is using more energy than you can even possibly make, you need every bit of rest you have. And by the way, some of that development only happens when you sleep. That's it. It doesn't happen otherwise. The less you sleep, the less development happens. It's just like toddlers. Teens need 8 to 10 hours of sleep to develop properly. That's on top of everything else going on in your brain creates the need for rest and sleep. You got to have it. Now, the body's automatic wake-up call is 3 to 5 hours later for adolescents than the adult. So think about it. Being a teenager, if they wake you up at 7 a.m., it's like waking an adult at 4 a.m. At wake up, most of you teens are already distressed because you didn't rest well that last night. So you can expect you to be much less able to think on top of everything else. You need every bit of sleep you can get so that your brain can work. All right, the body's evening sleepy melatonin delivery for adolescents is 3 to 5 hours later than adults. That means if the average adult gets sleepy at about 10 p.m., the average teen gets sleepy about 1 to 3 a.m., which means teaching you how to go to sleep at night is vital. But if you started it in childhood, it's so much easier. Oh, look, 8 to 10 hours of sleep is vital during the teen years. A lack of sleep creates distress that interferes with development. If you're able to sleep, now this is for everybody else, any of the adults in the room, if they get a chance to sleep, let them sleep. You're messing with their development. Okay. Look, the teen years are about building maturity and preparing for the launch into adulthood. I just want you to become aware of the brick walls. Make sure you know about them before you launch yourself into one, or at least wear a helmet. Well, thank you for joining us for Session 3, Multiply by 10, the special developmental challenges for teens. As you could say, it's not easy being a teen. And these step classes are presented by the Kansas Traffic Safety Resource Office. They want you to be safe not only in a vehicle, but have a safe and healthy life. So please join us for Session 4, the 3 R's, the special risks associated with adolescence. And these are the risks that are unique to teens because they're based on all the changes in your brain. So we'll cover those in our next session. This is Karen Williams, and that's my email at the bottom. If you have questions, your class needs to have some answers to something, give me an email. So thank you. Thank you for joining us. Bye.